I was 7 years old when I first learned that laughter could hurt more than yelling. It was a Tuesday night in spring, and Mom had made spaghetti, her version, which was just overcooked noodles drowning in watery tomato sauce. Dad was flipping channels with the remote in one hand and his fork in the other. My brother, Jason, sat across from me at the dinner table, already halfway through his second plate. I reached for the Parmesan, but my elbow bumped my glass. Milk spilled everywhere. There was a moment of silence before the room erupted in a chorus of groans. "Oh, Emily," Dad sighed, not even turning away from the TV. "Of course it was you." Jason snorted. "Nice going, disaster girl." Mom got up to grab a dish towel, muttering, "Honestly, can't we get through one dinner without a performance?" I opened my mouth to say sorry, but before I could, Dad added, "You'll be a great storm chaser one day. Wherever you go, messes follow." They all laughed. Loud, careless laughter. Like I wasn't sitting right there, my cheeks hot, hands frozen above the spill. "It was just a joke," Jason said, waving a hand when he saw my face. But I wasn't laughing. At school, my teacher told me I was quiet but imaginative. I liked her. She let me read during lunch. Books made more sense than people did. Stories didn't laugh when you cried. Stories stayed where you left them. One afternoon, after a spelling test, I drew a picture of a girl sitting on a cloud, looking down at the world. She had tape over her mouth. I thought it was clever. When I showed it to Jason later, he just raised an eyebrow. "You're weird," he said. Like, seriously weird. Then he grabbed the drawing and added stink lines coming off the girl's head. "There. Now it's accurate." Mom saw and laughed. "It's just a joke, Em. Don't be so sensitive." That was her favorite phrase. A fix-all. Like duct tape for feelings. When I cried, I was dramatic. When I was quiet, I was moody. When I tried to talk, I was overreacting. When I stayed silent, I was being difficult. No matter what I did, I was wrong. At bedtime, I would lie under my covers and pretend I was a rock. Hard, cold, unreadable. Rocks don't cry. Rocks don't feel embarrassed or confused. Rocks don't knock over milk and get laughed at for it. Sometimes, I'd whisper to myself, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe they were right. It got worse when I turned 8. One day, I wore a green sweater to school. I liked it. It had tiny sunflowers stitched on the sleeves. Jason saw me waiting for the bus and shouted, "Hey, Emily. Halloween's over. Why you still dressed like a leprechaun?" I laughed nervously, hoping it would stop there. But at dinner that night, Mom smirked. "Emily wore the cutest outfit today. Looked like a walking garden gnome." Even Dad chuckled. "Don't take it so hard," Jason added. "It's just a joke." I didn't touch my food. The noodles were rubbery again anyway. I started faking stomach aches to skip family events. At first, they bought it. Then they stopped asking. The quiet became my armor. The less I spoke, the less ammo I gave them. But silence is a lonely shield. You hold it up so long, you forget what your own voice sounds like. One day, I told Mom I didn't want to go to Jason's school play. She frowned. "Why not? He supported you at your spelling bee." "He didn't say anything at the spelling bee." "Still. Don't be selfish." "I just don't feel like it." She gave me a sharp look. "What's wrong with you lately? You've got such an attitude. All we do is joke around, and you act like we're monsters." I looked at her and said nothing. "Honestly, Emily," she sighed. "You've always been a little too much." Like, emotionally. She left the room. And I whispered to myself again, maybe I am too much. The truth was, I never asked for apologies. I asked for kindness. For understanding. For someone, anyone, to notice the way my hands shook when they made fun of me in front of guests. Or how my eyes darted to the floor every time someone used sensitive like a slur. But they didn't see it. Or worse, they did, and didn't care. My third-grade teacher, Ms. Reynolds, gave us a journal assignment. Write about how you feel, she said. No one will read it but me. So I wrote. Sometimes I feel like my family hates me, but they say they love me. So maybe I'm wrong. Ms. Reynolds never said anything. But the next week, she started checking in with me every morning. She'd crouch down and say, "Good to see you, Emily. How are you today?" I'd nod and smile. No one had ever asked me that like they meant it. One night, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. "She's so sensitive lately," Mom said. "Everything's a big deal with that girl." "Maybe she's just hormonal," Dad replied. "Girls get that way." She was like that even as a baby. I swear, she cried if you looked at her sideways. They both laughed. And I stood in the hallway, invisible. I tiptoed back to my room, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling. My fists clenched the blankets, but I didn't cry. Rocks don't cry. But inside, something cracked. That night, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind you scream or write in red ink. Just a quiet vow. I won't give them anything else to laugh at. I stopped drawing. I stopped talking back. I stopped sharing my thoughts unless they were safe and bland and unremarkable. They thought I was growing up. What I was really doing was disappearing. By the time I turned 13, I had perfected the art of shrinking myself. Not physically, of course. But emotionally. Verbally. Socially. I had become an expert at taking up as little space as possible. At school, I sat at the edge of groups, smiled when spoken to, laughed politely, even when I didn't get the joke. I kept a running list in my head of what not to say, what facial expressions wouldn't invite attention, what tone wouldn't come across as too much. At home, the silence became normal. No one really noticed. They were too busy with Jason's football schedule or Mom's new obsession with gardening. I became background noise in my own house. And somehow, that felt safer. It was during Thanksgiving that year when the old patterns returned, sharper, more cutting than ever. We had extended family over. The kind that only shows up with cheap wine and loud stories. I was carrying a tray of deviled eggs when my cousin Mark, who was 20 and insufferable, bumped into me on purpose. The tray slipped. Eggs scattered across the hardwood floor. Everyone turned to look. "Oh, come on," he said with a laugh. Classic Emily move. Jason chimed in, "The girl can't carry a tray, but she wants to be a scientist or something." Mom appeared behind me with a dish towel. "Clean it up before someone steps on it." I bent down silently and picked up each egg. My face burned. I felt everyone's eyes. No one helped. Not even Jason. Later, I sat alone on the back porch, watching the cold wind shake the last yellow leaves off the trees. I wasn't crying. I hadn't cried in a long time. Mom came out with a wine glass in her hand. "You okay?" she asked, but not like she really cared. "I guess," I replied. She sat beside me, looked at the sky, then said, "You really take things personally." I didn't answer. "Emily, everyone was just teasing. You always make things so big." And there it was again. The phrase I had memorized. That night, I wrote in my journal. Maybe they don't realize I'm a real person. Maybe they think I'm a character in a sitcom they've watched too many times, someone to laugh at when the scene gets boring. I tore the page out 5 minutes later and flushed it. Because if they ever read it, they'd probably laugh at that, too. School wasn't much better. I had a history teacher named Mr. Wallace who liked toughening up students with sarcasm. One day, after I gave a presentation on Eleanor Roosevelt, he chuckled in front of the class. "Nice reading, Emily. Too bad it sounded like a bedtime story." The class laughed. I nodded. Smiled. Sat down. But I remember thinking, if I disappeared right now, would anyone notice? During my sophomore year, I tried opening up once. Just once. Jason had broken his leg in a skateboarding accident, and Mom was fussing over him like he'd survived a war. I sat on the living room couch while she folded laundry. "Hey," I said quietly. "Can I talk to you about something?" She kept folding. "If it's about Jason's ice cream in the fridge, I'll get more." "No, it's not that." I hesitated. "It's just, sometimes when people make fun of me, I don't really think it's a joke." She paused, then gave me a long look. "You've got to toughen up," she said flatly. "Life doesn't hand out trophies for feelings." "But, Emily." She set the laundry basket down. "Do you know how many people in the world have real problems? You've got a house, food, clothes. Some teasing isn't the end of the world." I bit the inside of my cheek. "I know," I said. "Sorry." She exhaled like the conversation had exhausted her. "God, you really do make everything a mountain." Then she walked away. And once again, I was left holding the weight of emotions that didn't belong to anyone but me. That winter, I got accepted into the school choir. I was hesitant at first, but my English teacher had encouraged me after hearing me hum during class. I didn't tell my family until the night before our first concert. "Oh," Mom said. "That's cute." Jason shrugged. "Don't mess up the high notes." "No good luck." "No hugs. Just don't embarrass us." At the concert, they sat in the back row and didn't clap any louder than strangers. Afterward, I waited for them near the door. "You were good," Mom said vaguely. "But you held your hands weird." Jason added, "Yeah, you looked like you were scared the whole time." Dad didn't say anything at all. I went home and stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror for 10 straight minutes. Then I whispered, "Don't cry. They don't get to have that." By junior year, I had my own small universe. A part-time job at the library. A spiral notebook I never tore pages from. A safe, quiet friend named Sarah who never asked too many questions. We talked about books, music, college. I never told her much about home. She once asked why I never invited her over. I said, "It's a little crowded." That was easier than saying, "My house is full of people who don't see me." One afternoon, I came home early and heard Mom on the phone. "Emily." "Yeah, she's. I don't know. Distant. Moody. She's always been that way." There was a pause. "She acts like everything's a trauma. I swear, I can't say a word without her acting wounded." Another pause. Then, "She just feels too much. And honestly, it's exhausting." I walked upstairs, opened my door, and closed it behind me. That night, I made tea and studied for finals. I didn't mention the phone call. Didn't confront her. Didn't scream. But I never looked at her the same again. The thing about being constantly invalidated is that eventually, you internalize it. I started apologizing before I spoke. laughing before anyone else could. Making jokes about myself, just to take the sting away first. But sometimes, when the house was quiet and no one was watching, I'd sit in my room and stare at the ceiling. And wonder who I might have been, if someone had just said, "You're not too much. You're enough." College was the first place I ever felt alone and safe at the same time. No one there knew me as the sensitive girl or the screw-up. They didn't know about the spilled milk or the jokes or the heavy silences at dinner. I arrived on campus with 2 suitcases, a worn-out acceptance letter, and a heart full of quiet hope. I had spent so long shrinking myself that I barely knew what it felt like to stretch. But college gave me space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to speak, without having to fight to be heard. At first, I didn't say much in class. I sat in the back. Took notes like my life depended on it. Nodded politely. Avoided eye contact. But slowly, something shifted. It started with a psychology professor. Dr. Maya Latham. Mid-40s. Stern but kind. She didn't just lecture, she listened. One day after class, I lingered while the others left. She looked up from her papers. "Something on your mind?" she asked. I opened my mouth to say no. But then I didn't. "I think I want to study people," I said. "Why they do what they do. Why some people hurt others without realizing it." She nodded like she understood more than I said out loud. "Then start," she said. "You're here to learn who you are, too. Not just the material." I went back to my dorm and cried quietly into my pillow. Because for the first time in my life, someone made me feel like I could be something. In sophomore year, I started therapy. It was required for one of our practicum rotations, but I signed up early. I remember walking into the student counseling center with shaking hands. The room smelled like lavender and pencil shavings. There was a small tray of mints by the receptionist's desk. My therapist was a woman named Laura. Soft voice. Warm eyes. No judgment. In our third session, I said it out loud. I don't think my family ever actually liked me. They tolerated me. Until they didn't. Laura didn't flinch. She just asked, "And how does that feel?" I paused. Then said, "Like I've been gaslit for most of my life." It was the first time I used that word out loud. Gaslit. I started remembering things differently. Not how they wanted me to remember them, but how they actually happened. How my birthday parties were always forgotten if Jason had a game. How my mother once laughed in my face when I got my period early and stained my pants in 7th grade. How she told me, "You're too emotional for your own good," and made me scrub the seat of the car in silence. How my father always found ways to turn every dinner into a roast, and I was the main course. How Jason once told me, "No one's going to love you if you cry like that," after I found out my pet hamster died. And how no one ever apologized. Not once. I went home for Thanksgiving during junior year. I thought maybe, just maybe, some distance had changed things. It hadn't. Dinner was exactly the same: dry turkey, watery wine, and passive-aggressive comments hidden under thin napkins and thick tension. Mom asked me how school was. I said, "Good. I'm in clinicals now." She raised her eyebrows. "You're really gonna become a therapist? You can't even handle teasing from your own family." Jason laughed. "Hope your patient's like walking on eggshells." I set my fork down. And something in me, finally, broke free. "Do you guys ever listen to yourselves?" I asked, voice steady. "You treat me like a punchline and then wonder why I don't come home." They all froze. Mom blinked. "Oh, come on. It's not that serious. I stared at her. You've been doing this for years, I said. Minimizing, mocking, dismissing. Every time I try to talk, it's you're too sensitive. You're making a big deal. But it is a big deal. Because I'm a person. And I deserve to be treated like one. Dad cleared his throat. Mom stood up slowly. Emily, you're being dramatic. Again. You always twist things. And that was it. That was the moment I stopped trying. I left 2 days early and didn't say goodbye. On the drive back, I blasted music and screamed into the steering wheel. I cried at a gas station near the state border. I threw away the leftover pie Mom insisted I take. And when I got back to my dorm, I sat on my bed, opened my laptop, and submitted transfer applications. I applied to graduate school in New York. A month later, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. You're really just gonna disappear, huh? I didn't respond. She sent another. You're overreacting. We were just joking. You always make things so personal. And I replied, for the last time. Okay. Then I won't bring it up again. In New York, I started over. New number. New apartment. New name on the mailbox, just mine. No more pretending. No more asking for crumbs of kindness from people who thought their cruelty was comedy. I got my master's. Passed my licensing exam. Took a job at a small trauma clinic in the East Village. My clients told me their stories, and I listened. But every now and then, a girl would walk into my office who looked like I did at 14, shoulders slumped, voice barely above a whisper, scared to speak. And I'd tell her what no one ever told me. You're not too much. You were just surrounded by people who gave you too little. And then I'd watch her straighten up, like she was remembering how to stand tall again. I still had nights where the memories snuck in, quiet and sharp. I still sometimes heard my mother's voice in my head, telling me I was overreacting. But now, I had another voice, too. One I built myself. The one that said, maybe I wasn't too sensitive. Maybe I was just unprotected. And now I protect myself. My apartment in New York is small but peaceful. It smells like eucalyptus and old books. There's a soft rug beneath my feet and a kettle that sings when it's ready. I don't have much, just the essentials and a few things I actually like, a painting of the ocean I found at a flea market, a lamp shaped like a moon, and a framed quote above my desk that reads, "You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I found it on a postcard once and never forgot it. I started my own private practice at 27. It was terrifying at first, rent was high, insurance paperwork was brutal, and some nights I barely slept. But I was free. Every chair in the waiting room, every plant by the window, every book on the shelf, I chose it all. My office became a sanctuary for the version of me that never had one growing up. Clients came. Slowly at first. Then more. Survivors of emotional abuse, parental neglect, chronic invalidation. People who had learned to doubt their feelings, to apologize for existing. I recognized them before they even spoke. Because I used to sit where they sat. One rainy Tuesday, I got a call from an Ohio number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later that night, I listened to it while folding laundry. "Emily, it's your mother. Your father had a stroke. He's stable, but it's serious. We're trying to put together some kind of support plan and, well, you're in the field. You'd know what to do. We need you. Please call back." I sat on the floor for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. Then I made tea. And didn't call back. 2 days later, she texted. I'm not asking you to fix anything. Just, help us understand what comes next. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed. I think you should find someone else. A professional who hasn't been laughed at every time she tried to speak in your house. She left it on read. That night, I went to bed early. I didn't toss and turn. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't second-guess my decision like I used to when I was younger, when love felt like a contract and obligation felt like a tax on being too emotional. I slept deeply. And when I woke up, the sun was pouring into my apartment like forgiveness. A week passed. Then two. Another call. I ignored it. Then a message from Jason. Can you just grow up already? He's still your father. No, hello. No, how are you? Just accusation masked as maturity. I didn't reply. I had grown up. I just didn't grow up to serve them. A month later, one of my clients came in crying. She had just cut off contact with her emotionally abusive mother and was doubting herself. She asked, what if it makes me a bad daughter? And I told her what I needed to hear at her age. Love doesn't mean constant access. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. You can love someone and still choose to protect yourself from them. She exhaled like someone had opened a window inside her. And for a moment, I saw my younger self again, curled in bed, trying not to cry loud enough for the walls to hear. I wish I could reach back in time and hold her. But now I get to do something better. I protect her. Every day. By living differently. My mother emailed me a few weeks later. It was longer than I expected. Full of updates about my father's condition, vague attempts at sounding neutral, and one paragraph that stood out. I know we weren't perfect parents. But you've always been hard to read, Emily. So guarded. Like you were holding a grudge even as a child. I always hoped you'd grow out of that. There was no apology. Just a justification. Just a reshaping of my pain to fit their comfort. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a blank Word document and started writing a list. What I don't owe anyone. An explanation for my boundaries. My emotional labor. Performances at holidays. Gratitude for surviving a home that never felt safe. My forgiveness on their timeline. The next time I walked into my office, I added something new to the wall. A small print that read, "You can love your family. And still say, I don't owe you anymore." It hung right above the client chair. Some of them notice it. Some don't. But I see it every day. And every time I do, it feels like armor I didn't know I needed. The letter came on a Thursday. A real one. Handwritten. With my name spelled out in full across the front in my mother's handwriting, blocky, precise, emotionally distant even on paper. I stood at the mailbox for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single folded page. No greeting. Just this. I thought you'd be there. No, dear Emily. No, I'm sorry. Just 5 words. And then 3 more. Like always. I set the letter down on my coffee table. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. But I felt something heavy settle in the room. Like the presence of someone who used to live here, long gone but not quite erased. I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched traffic move slowly through the rain. And thought, no, Mom. I was always there. You just never looked. A few weeks later, Jason emailed. This time, he didn't yell. She's not doing great. Just thought you'd want to know. I didn't. But I read every word anyway. Apparently, my mother had started forgetting things. Not in a dramatic, movie script kind of way. Just the little things, appointments, birthdays, how to spell certain words. She'd started missing doses of her own medication. Dad couldn't help much now. Jason was too busy. He ended the message with, "It's not too late to show up." But that was where he was wrong. It was. It had been. For years. There's a myth in some families that the youngest, the sensitive one, is the one who'll always come back. Who'll always forgive. Who'll show up out of guilt or duty or some inherited version of love that doesn't look like love at all. But I had stopped believing that myth. I had stopped needing to be seen by people who only ever watched me through the wrong lens. A few months passed. Spring bloomed over the city in soft pinks and yellows. I started running again. Bought myself fresh tulips every weekend. Learned how to cook something besides eggs. At work, a new client asked me, "Do you think people can change?" I replied, honestly, "I think people can change. But not everyone wants to." She nodded. Then asked, "Did your parents ever change?" I paused. "I changed," I said. And that, I think, was the real answer. One evening, I visited a quiet bookstore tucked away in the West Village. It had a little corner with mismatched chairs and a sleepy cat curled on a windowsill. I picked up a book of essays and opened to a random page. The line read, "Sometimes the apology never comes. You just learn how to live like you deserved it anyway." I stood there for a moment, holding that truth in both hands. Then I bought the book.